will be very. So let's pray that God will enable us to study from God's word. The objective of this program is as Corona has affected the whole world and especially India in a very pathetic way. All the colleges and universities are closed, and students are. That's the reason last Saturday I got an idea. Why don't we have webinar for my own contacts whom I met in CMTC's leadership programs, study center, and also in NMTC. So when I approached some of them, immediately they responded that they will be very happy to join. In that way, almost 47 of our friends are joined in this group. And I really thank my spiritual son, Brother Vadivel, who is in Sweden now. He's a software engineer. He told me that it's very much possible to have this facility. So in a very short time, we organized it. The second objective is not to be wasting time. I want to see that all of us will be motivated to study a book. After studying the book of Titus, we will be motivated to study other books also. Maybe not as a group, but in your own context, personal Bible study or in your group Bible study, you can study that. Third objective is very clear. We are studying God's word, and the book of Titus is so powerful and very relevant for our times. When we look at our church, when we look at our own ministry, there is a tremendous need, and believers, Christian families, Christian fellowships, Christian churches, we need God's word. In that way, study of book of Titus will be very helpful for our life and for our ministry. In that way, these are the three objectives. Number one, students should make use of their holidays effectively. Number two, we need to make use of this facility so that we can study the book of Titus very clearly for our own life and ministry. And third one, we have to be motivated to study more on our own way, either as a group Bible study or in a personal Bible study. So may the Lord help us. We'll just wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Fourthly, took the letter from Paul to Corinth. Otherwise, between Paul and the church of Corinth. In these days, we know that there is a great need of people becoming. Sorry. In these days, we know that we need to be like a bridge between God's servant and the church. Even in our EU ministry, we know that we need many young people who can stand like a bridge between seniors and students. And one more ministry we can note down from the scripture is in Paul's last letter, that is 2 Timothy. In the last passage, he talks about Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Maybe a new mission he had. So he was an active person in Lord's ministry. As I look at the life and ministry of Titus, I see that the first book in New Testament was Galatians, and Paul's last letter is 2 Timothy, and Titus was very much involved in every ministry of it. So my dear brothers and sisters, it is not just the book of Titus. The life of Titus itself is a big challenge for us. The main message of book of Titus
I put it in this way: the teaching on sound doctrine and practical Christian life with good deeds are most needed. And for that, we need to appoint leaders with character. So this is the main message I could see that in the book of Titus is highlighted. I want to underline some of the words. Number one, teaching. The word teach or teaching or related words are coming 16 times in this book. So in that way, it is a very important word. Sound. Uh, Another important word comes in this book, sound doctrine. And one more phrase is good deeds. We need to underline. This we are going to look at a little later. And that's also a main message in the book of Titus. And leadership in the church and in the fellowship is another matter of concern that we can learn from this book of Titus, along with 1 Timothy. Repeated words and phrases. Okay, I want to highlight four. Number one, doing good. 6 times this phrase comes. Some of the vernacular languages, it may be one word, especially in my language, Tamil, that's one word. But in English, doing good as a phrase repeatedly coming 6 times. In different context, Paul is writing. We are going to look at it when we are going to study this chapter in detail. Second word I would highlight is sound. We see that 5 times that word sound is coming. 2 times, chapter 1 verse 9 and chapter 2 verse 1, it comes as a sound teaching or sound doctrine. And chapter 1 verse 13, it talks about sound in faith. And in chapter 2 verse 2, very interestingly, Paul adds love and endurance along with faith as sound. We are going to look at these passages a little later, but please note down the word sound is repeatedly coming. And the fifth point is verse 8 in chapter 2, sound in speech. So in that way, all these 5 verses talk about sound. Okay, already I told you that the word teach is important. Related words are teaching, rebuking, encouraging, reminding, stressing, and warning. Okay, totally 16 times that word comes one way or other. Then one more observation I made is so that it's a lovely phrase. Comes at least 5 times in this book. We need to study that. If you do this, so that will have an impact. That's the way Paul says that we are going to study little later. So my friends, please note down, doing good so that are 2 phrases, and sound and teach are 2 verses are repeatedly coming in these 3 chapters. Book of Titus does not have much doctrinal teachings. When we look at other Pauline writings, we know that he's teaching the church with many doctrinal teachings. But in the pastoral epistles like Timothy and Titus, his concern is the leadership should be proper in the church, and very little teaching only given on Christian doctrines. There are 2 powerful passages you cannot afford to miss. Chapter 2 verses 11 to 14 and chapter 3 verses 3 to 7. We will look at these passages a little later, but kindly note down, God's grace, God's mercy, God's love are highlighted in these 2 powerful passages. There are 3 chapters, and I have outlined for 3 chapters, but my interest is paragraphs. We all know that when Paul wrote, he didn't write verse 1, chapter 1, not like that. He has just written a letter. Very late only, the chapters and verses are included. When we look at the whole 46 verses in this book, we know that there are 7 powerful paragraphs, or clear-cut paragraphs. 7 clear-cut paragraphs are highlighted. First paragraph is introduction. It is not a simple introduction. Who writes and to whom it is written. Rather, you can see that the greatness of God is highlighted in the first 4 verses in this letter. We will study that in the next class. Second paragraph talks about appointing qualified leaders for the church. Chapter 1, verses 5 to 9. Third paragraph talks about we need to be beware of wrong people around us. In the church and in the society, there are many wrong people around. After challenging Titus to appoint leaders, he says that beware of these wrong people around. Fourth paragraph talks about commendable life or believers' responsible life. Chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. When you say that I am a child of God, we need to be leading a life which is pleasing to the Lord, and we should be a role model to others. And Paul talks about some of the wonderful qualities needed for a believer that we'll be studying in the 4th paragraph. And in the 5th paragraph, we are going to study the grace of God. It is a clear-cut message on grace of God. Chapter 2, verses 11 to 15, we see that. The 6th paragraph, chapter 3, verses 1 to 11, talks about excellence in teaching values. Okay? In a very beautiful way, Paul writes to Titus to teach on Christian values. So that is the 6th paragraph. The 7th paragraph is a conclusion, but it's not simple conclusion. Paul, being a people person, talks about person, and we are going to look at briefly in the 7th paragraph about Paul's concern for people. So there are 7 paragraphs. So my motivation to you is study the book of Titus or read all these 46 verses in this way, 7 paragraphs in that way. Not like chapter wise. Okay, though we are going to look at the next 3 classes in chapter wise, my concern is look at the 7 paragraphs. Okay, if you want to have an outline, we can keep it like this. Chapter 1 talks about triune God and good leaders. Chapter 2, teaching and encouraging. And chapter 3, purposeful and profitable living. So these are points which are coming out very clearly in these 3 chapters. Okay, we are going to study in detail the whole book of Titus in next 3 classes. Before that, I want you to read all the 46 verses together. Okay, when you take a letter, you won't read just one paragraph and leave it. We read the whole letter together. After that only we will be looking at the verses and paragraphs. In that way, kindly read all the 46 verses. I have just found out that it will take hardly 15 minutes for us to read 46 verses together very gently and very slowly. In that way, you can give 15 minutes to read all these 46 verses. And before this evening class, I want you to look at chapter 1. Note down the greatness of God highlighted in verses 1 to 4 in chapter 1. Greatness of God. There are clear-cut phrases and words mentioned about God in 4 verses. Please note down. Secondly, verses 5 to 9. Please note down the characteristics of the Christian leaders. The needed characteristics of the Christian leaders are highlighted in these verses. Please make note of it. And then kindly discuss with me if you have any doubts through email or WhatsApp. And this evening we'll be joining in the second class.